70s.
Yeah.
We had the gold one. We were using the gold or the shark.
Hello. Hi.
Oh wait, this is signed.
Oh,
signed.
that one?
Oh, yeah, we did it.
This one was signed also.
Yeah, I went through and signed all the letting magic in.
Yeah.
So it looks like I did sign. And we're not signing the decks because there's no good place to sign them. Sorry.
I'll be a big girl about it.
They can give you a signed book plate if you want, and then so you can tuck it inside. You would like that?
Yeah, if it's available, that would be amazing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you're so welcome. Thanks for coming out.
Signing ever.
All right, let me.
I couldn't believe there was an author I actually knew.
Hi, everybody. Just hang in there. We're just doing some light housekeeping, so just look at everybody and enjoy it for a minute. Before we get started.
If we need more chairs, we can get more chairs.
Okay, so more chairs.
Yeah, I figured out this. I'll sit and then after it's over, I'll start looking around.
Oh, there's so much to look at.
All right.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna sit here and look, and then get up later and physically walk
Perfect.
around.
It's
And that's
so
before you
gorgeous
even get
in
into the
here.
crystals next door.
Right.
Oh no.
I gotta say, it's Tina's brain that operates.
That's why I
the
said
color
excited
way.
about this.
Well, it's stunning.
Everybody
really
loves
is.
it. They're like, it's in color order.
Yeah.
That's Tina's brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who wanted the book? Here's the book plate, honey.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Maia.
You're welcome.
I'll just go next door when it's over and get the book that
Okay.
you have for help.
Thank you so
Right?
much.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. We'll get it.
Nice.
Yeah. And then we're getting some more chairs.
So nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Maya.
Following
Me too. I'm so glad. Hi.
Hey,
Yeah.
David.
Nice to meet
I'm
you.
so glad you came up. I know you're like Carolina.
Yeah. It's been so amazing. These two are the best hostesses ever.
We love having you.
Thank you, Alex. Awesome.
How can I get something? No, I have books with me. I can buy, but I was if I began anything.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
My niece,
So if you have books with
she's
you,
an artist.
I have
She does this
pens.
for another woman. And like she shows me the art.
Those of you online, we just need a few minutes.
I would say I can bring over.
Oh, yay!
I have companion. I'm so happy.
I have the last two.
I know. Beautiful. Time I buy them, not even when
Yeah, you guys don't have this one.
Now we have to get it.
Okay, so this one is the book that sells
I
CDs.
said, I'll just go to
And
Angela.
if you own it, it is their very
They
favorite.
love it.
And people love this the best of all the
Yeah.
books, and no one knows about it.
All right, so
I want all three. I don't want to buy just one.
weird and funny because I started with the first one, next,
No, I was
next,
talking about
next,
the
and then I was like,
I
you know what, she should
at one time because
my whole year, the middle of the year, or something
You know,
like that.
I
And
would name this book The Wild West Almanac, and I think that was a much better title. And they still
They
take
changed
The Wild
it.
West Companion, and I think that's part of the problem. I think now I did it when they don't know what it's companion. They don't have, right? There's a secret cult that loves this book.
yes, I'm in it, whatever that is.
It's at every economic consultant.
I don't
So
know.
that you can
Thank you.
have things in.
Oh, I love it.
And it starts at Samhain, like the real deer starts at Samhain, not in January.
Yeah.
All right. You are so welcome. So glad
I'm so sorry.
you need a sign?
This one purchased.
Oh,
I have two of my own books though.
all right.
You guys are so cute. Hi, everybody. We're going to get started any minute. We are going to be putting in a reorder, and Maya did sign book plates, so everything that we get coming in on the reorder, because a lot is sold out. Like night school's out of stock, but we are going to be getting more in. We have book plates, so we will be popping them into the books. Don't worry, okay? Don't worry, my friends. Just be patient with us. We're going to get started any minute. Thank you for being here.
Hey, do we have anyone who feels like they are really good with an iPhone? Because I could use some photos.
Here you
I can
go.
do one.
Awesome, thank you.
Here.
So, okay, so I kind of have a very particular thing, which
Okay.
is I want to
You got it, yeah. One, okay. I do a thought she's to grab the design.
Awesome, thank you.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
All right.
She's like, we're good.
Are we doing this?
I'm
Yeah.
looking at this one and I get confused. 'Cause I'm like,
Is there a good angle over there, Jake? Or
It
should
has
I?
to, well,
Yeah.
once Maya comes this way, we'll
All right.
come this way and I'll pick it.
Sit to the middle.
You're in the middle.
You're in the middle.
Maya in the middle.
Maya in the middle.
Hi, welcome. Should we, yeah,
More
there
like,
should be.
it's gotta come all the way over.
Thank you.
This way.
Wow, y'all, this is so much fun.
Do you see how dedicated everybody is? Because this is just the best weather to travel in.
And the train station's closed.
Yeah, and our train station is,
Yeah,
they're not forever.
I got a note from someone in New York City. They were like, the train station's closed. I'm just gonna come.
Yeah, they're putting in, I know that we're nearing the end of 2022, but we're finally getting an elevator so the train station will finally be accessible.
Yeah.
Which is amazing because people would have had to travel around. So it's huge for finally for this to be happening. So it's an inconvenience, but it's great.
It's well worth it.
Yes. Welcome everybody. We're so excited. Hi Instagram. We're so excited.
This is Maia Toll.
Have you guys here with us today with Maia Toll. So I think we're gonna do some questions. Yeah, please do. Just push me out of the way. I'm used
We
to
have cookies and cider and rosé if you guys would like some too.
Rosé, that's a wine, right?
Did you like that? She goes, what's rosé? I'm like, it's a wine. She's like, oh, okay.
I know what's this from. This is for our use. It's a wine. Thanks.
I'm like, that's me. Multitasking in my brain is, it's normal here. So welcome. Thanks for being here. I think for today, what we were thinking about the format is some questions and answer, and then Maya's going to do a reading, right? A little reading. So let me get started. Are you also okay with questions from the collective? And if any of you guys at home have questions, we will be coming over to check the feed. So please participate with us. We appreciate that you guys are with us virtually and in spirit, and we want to include you as well. So put your questions down and we will come and check them as we go, okay?
And for the sake of anybody that's new to visiting us, I'm Danielle. That's Dina.
Hi.
We are the co-owners of Amityville Apothecary on Long Island, New York. Maia Toll is a gifted author and creator and herbalist and wonderful many things. she's up visiting from Asheville, North Carolina, and we're really thrilled to have you here. So thank you.
So maybe that's the first question. The first question is, how would you describe yourself, Maya?
Oh dear.
In the hot seat.
Oh boy. I think like I can tell you how I wouldn't describe myself more than how I would. A lot of people call me a witch, and I have such a huge problem with labels. I hate labels. I feel like as soon as you put a label on someone or something, then people think they know what that thing is, who that person is. And what I've noticed is that like we all mean very different things by the word witch. And so you stick that label on someone and then everyone stops asking questions. They kind of just think like whatever their answer to that is what you are. So I'm pretty actually label avoidant. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Many things.
Many
magical
things.
Right, but also it gives us room to sort of grow into who we want to become. And if you put a label on yourself, then doesn't it feel like not only in the current moment you're in the box, but also sometimes for the rest of your life?
Yeah, I mean, like then you have to escape the box. One of the things that I talk about in the book, and like it goes so fast that probably a lot of people don't even notice, but in the very beginning of the book, my girlfriend has just cheated on me and I am looking for a new apartment. And when I started dating women, my parents like, oh my God, you're a lesbian. My uncle was gay. There was like, family stuff around that went back a generation before me. And all of a sudden that stuff got put on me. And I was like, I just went on a date with a girl. That's all I did. Like, I don't have any like big life plan here, except there's this human that I like. And what ended up happening is like my parents like doubled down on the, well, what's going on, and are we going to support this? Are we not going to support this? And it became a thing. And then because it became a thing, the lesbian community were the people who were open and supportive. And I was just like, well, lesbian, because like it wasn't that I thought about it or whatever, but it was like, if you're going to put me in a box, then I get reactive response, and turns out I'm bisexual. But, like I spent a lot of time kind of defending the ground of I am a lesbian because of all the things that were going on around me that were making me feel like I didn't have fluidity, like I had to declare something. And so, I feel like whenever we get into labels, you're asking people to make a declaration. And then, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, maybe they're just defensive. And you're not leaving room for the expansiveness of who we all are. We're all not one thing. I think that's part of the reason like divorce is so hard, is you think of yourself as the partner to that person, and then when that person's gone, you're like, who am I? So,
Yeah. Well said. And then you evolve with time, and things change. And if I was still working in the original path that I set out after college, I'd be working in like finance. Then I went into advertising by complete coincidence. Then I came into metaphysics, which was revisiting back to like all my interests as a child.
Yeah.
That I was climbing trees and like doing astrology, and everyone's like, that's weird. And I'm like, yeah, but I like it. And here we are now. I left that old life to open this store with Dina, and people are like, you're going to sell rocks? Are you having like a midlife? You're gonna have a midlife crisis? And I'm like, you can call it whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's a major life adjustment and a huge risk, but it's a calculated risk, and I'm following my truth. And now, 5 years later, people are like, I can't believe you created this. I love this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
everybody was saying you're gonna sell rocks, like making fun of me almost, waiting for me to fail. But I just followed my truth of what felt right, and I went with that, and I had the conviction with the support and the experience and like all of the groundwork to prepare us for that moment. But that was all evolution and a culmination of everything. It didn't just like happen. So
I remember, my mom used to be like so obviously embarrassed about me. And I remember saying to her, Mom, now I'm the embarrassment that you don't want to tell your friends about, but in 20 years, I'm the person you're going to want at your cocktail parties. And
it's so interesting. And I think that story and the evolution, that it's not just, it's interesting, I think, of what's so wonderful. How many people have read in completion this Letting Magic In yet? Everybody's fine. Okay, so we're gonna try and limit the spoiler alerts here. But what's so beautiful about this book and the tale, and we're gonna ask Maia some questions about it. Again, we have to, I guess, limit the spoiler alerts.
Okay.
Is that it gives us permission in witnessing and understanding and hearing somebody else's story, and like Danielle's story, Maia's story. It gives us permission to break out of our own boxes, out of our own definitions, out of, even if it's either placed upon us by our families of origin or our peers or what have you, or self-imposed. So, it's beautiful, because I think we all are looking for permission to take risks when we're scared. But we were talking in the back rooms. Talk about the inspiration for why you decided to write this book. Like, what was it, already a creator, an author many times over. You could have started with this.
I tried.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the book that I have been trying to write since 2016. And I didn't have the chops. So I've been writing, I don't know, since I was 9 or 10 years old. And I used to joke that I was a writer without a story. You know, my dad would say, when are you going to write your novel? I'd say, as soon as I have a story. And so I knew that this Ireland experience was not only a story, it was my story. Like, nobody else could tell this story. It was my story. And I, you know, started to kind of edge my way towards working on it. I've been doing a blog since 2008. I've been, you know, writing in various ways. I wrote poetry through my 20s. And so I started working on this. And I was workshopping those early pages. And at the top of each chapter was an herb description. And I was noticing that, as I'm workshopping the pages, that I'm not getting any positive feedback about the general pages, but everyone loves the herb descriptions.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was like, wow, okay, it's going to take me a long time to get to the place where I can be the person who can write this memoir. But these herb descriptions are interesting to people, and I had a publisher interested in working with me. I'd been introduced to someone, and so I brought them these little herb descriptions and said, can we do a book? Well, actually, I said, can we do cards? And they said, oh, that's a great idea. And we went through, publishing is like, it is definitely a team process. You know, you have an editor, you work your idea with your editor, they take it to the larger team. And so the larger team came back and said, well, I actually can't do cards because we can't sell cards. We sell books, and in a bookstore, cards are bought by the gift buyer. And we don't know how to sell cards. We don't have, like, you know, the connections to make that happen. And I was like, so this project is just dead? Yup. And then a few months later, I was at an herb conference, and I ran into the publisher. The publisher is like the CEO of a publishing company. And I said, Deborah, is this really dead? Is there nothing we can do? And she said, we just don't have the contacts to sell cards. And like on the spot, literally just in the moment, I said, well, what if we did a book instead? And so that's how we got to the herbiary. Yeah, so that was the first book. The herbiary was all those little chapter headers. And then to turn it into a book, we're like, okay, how do we do that? And so we added in the reflection and the ritual, which at the time I was doing a program called Witch Camp. And so, yeah, I ran that for a decade. In fact, we're going to do a little tiny revision of Witch Camp on my Substack the first week of November. So if you're interested, we're going to pull out some of those old lessons. But, you know, I had plenty of rituals and reflections and things like that. I have always been a person, like, I do not want to tell you, go out into the world and spin 7 times to the left and spin 7 times to the right and sprinkle some mugwort and say these words.
Yeah.
Like, that to me is bullshit. You know, for me, whatever this thing we're doing, whether you call it witchery or craft or ritual or religion or, you know, however you want to name it, I think that we are connecting ourselves with source energy. And if you don't go through the process of connecting, if all you do is take someone, you know, the words that came to someone else when they connected and run through them, you're not really doing much. Like, you're not doing what you set out to do. So to me, the point is to get grounded, get connected, sink in, tap in, and then see what wants to come through you. And then your words are yours. Then your tools are yours. Then your ritual is yours. And so I'm always like teaching through sending people out to try different things. You know, go experiment with this, go experiment with that. Use some rose petals and see how they feel. If they don't feel good, try this other thing. You know, how do you kind of work your way through the different ways of doing energy work, ways of relating to tools, until you get to what's you. So I had tons of reflection and rituals. That wasn't hard. And we quickly put together the book. And then they came to me and they said, okay, we love your card ideas so much. We're going to put cards in the back. And I was like, what? They're like, yeah, we're going to put an envelope. We're going to put these cards perforated. And I said, hell no. I'm like, people who want cards do not want like flimsy little whatever. And they're like, we love the idea, we're doing it. Okay, publishing is a team sport. And I have to say, like, I was wrong about so many things with the herbiary, and they were right. I actually just got sales stats for like the Wild Wisdom collection, which is herbiary, bestiary, crystallary, the Wild Wisdom companion, and like all the decks and stuff. And we've sold almost 300,000 units, which like is amazing. You know, a lot of authors are really lucky if they get to 2,000 copies of their book sold. So to get up to 300,000 is amazing. And if I had been in charge, we would never have gotten there. I was like, I'm writing poems to the plants. It shall be on white paper, very clean and modern. When I saw the cover of the herbiary, I said, that looks like the Farmer's Almanac. And they were like, uh-huh. And I was like, uh-uh. And they were like, uh-huh. And, you know, so here we are.
I think that's an interesting point because so many times we get so caught up in how something should look. And that goes back to naming something or giving a label or putting it in a box. And it's really difficult to release a little bit of control. So, like, how is that for you? Like, do you have a practice that helps you sort of, because it's not natural for everybody, and maybe not natural for you, you know, to sort of like say, okay, this isn't really how I thought it would look, but let me go with it for a little while. Like, what does that look like for you?
Well, you know, I think a lot of it for me started with gratitude. I was so grateful to be, like, published. You know, so many people want to be published, and here I was being published. So, you know, now my agent's always saying to me, like, quit being so grateful. Like, you know, you're like stand up, say what you want. But I really do feel like publishing is a team sport, and there are people who understand the marketplace and things like that better than I do. And like, there are things that I think we get like right as a team, and things we get wrong. Like, for instance, see this tiny little subtitle, A Memoir of Becoming. I wanted like a significant, chunky subtitle that really told you what the book was about. I kind of love that books now have very long subtitles, because I feel like, you know, for a reader who doesn't know what it's about, it tells you. My editor comes from a more art book background, and she was like, oh no, we are not messing up that cover with some long subtitle.
I mean, it's a beautiful cover.
It is gorgeous. It's a gorgeous, right? It's a gorgeous cover. You know, and time will tell whether we got that right or wrong. I mean, I still think a chunkier subtitle would have served. But you know, this is what happens in publishing. You kind of.
But sometimes soft can be loud.
Sometimes, I think that. You have to remember, when you put a book into a bookstore, like, this is an incredibly special space. But my books are also in Barnes and Noble, and like, you know, your big stores where there's thousands, millions of books. And so, you know, when someone's going through and trying to decide which one are they going to take home, you need to give them enough to grab. But time's going to tell, right? Yeah. Time's going to tell whether we made the right decision or not, and I kind of feel like there's always a chance to redo on a next edition.
Oh yeah. But you also have a fan base, so once, you know, like, because you have a fan base, they're going to look for your new titles no matter what, you know, no matter what is on the cover, so.
I hope that is true. Do you all hear that?
You are now all formally obligated by contract and decree to purchase every single thing that Maia does from now until in
forever.
perpetuity.
Well, and the thing that I think, you know, like, people don't understand about publishing is it's contract work. So, like, for me to get the next contract, I have to have sold enough of the last book. And that's kind of scary. Like, I actually have had a couple moments where I've, you know, been like, okay, what's my next job? You know, I'll become a, like, saddle fitter for horses. Like, you know, I've actually thought about, like, even maybe being a book agent for other people. like at what point do I get to the end of the line? I don't know.
Is it a change or is it end? How many ands do you think you can have?
I can juggle a number of ands. I can and. But yeah, it's like, I don't know, like I've heard people talk about like breakups where it's like, oh, I didn't know that was the last time we were gonna have sex. You know what I mean? Like I always wonder when I'm gonna look back and be like, oh wow, that was the last book. I didn't realize.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting that you have Herbiary, which is also the name of your store and your business down south. But then you have the Bestiary, which is the animals, and Crystallary. And I liked what you were sharing with us privately about the collection of those, so if you can tell everyone about that.
Yep.
But then the next question after you elaborate a little bit is, you have Night School, which is kind of like about the craft. This is so personal. This is a memoir. So when you share those personal, intimate parts of yourself, you're like, that's very different than like, here's some stuff about my craft. This is like your personal, intimate history. So how does this differ from the rest of your work? And then you could talk about the other collection for the folks that might not be familiar.
Yeah. So memoir is very different. My writing group has a couple memoirs in it, and so for the past year, they've just been kind of like prepping me. They're like, toughen up your skin, alligator skin, you know, because comments on the older books are comments on my writing style or comments on my thoughts. This, like when people comment on this, they're making comments on my life, right? So that's a very different thing.
Yeah.
But for me, like, this is the book that I wish I had at this point in my life. And I couldn't find it. Like I read a lot of spiritual memoirs, and like a lot of them are not very well written. I mean, they're either not well written in terms of like writing skill, and so you're always aware that you're reading a book. You're like you know, there should have been a period there. You know what I mean? Like you know, like you can never get lost in it because you're constantly aware of the writing. So there's that. And then there's this other thing that I've noticed, which is people write from their point of view and they forget the reader. They forget that the reader exists. And they're deep in their personal journey and their personal story and how it looked to them. And we all have accumulated over the course of our lives our own set of symbols, our own things that mean things, that are touch points, that are not touch points for anybody else. And so if all you do is write exactly what you saw or experienced or dreamed or, you know, saw in a vision, another person might not be able to glean anything from that except, oh cool, you had an interesting experience that I can't follow. So for me, you know, part of the trick of writing this book was to write my personal story in a way that was universal. And from what I'm hearing from feedback, I at least, you know, got 80% of the way there. Like people are able to see their own journey overlaid with mine. They're able to use my journey as kind of like a, okay, I don't need to do this exact thing. I don't have to have these exact symbols, but I can kind of see my way through the woods. I can see like, oh, there's a cliff. Maya almost fell off it. I almost fell off it, but she wheeled herself back. I can wheel myself back. You know, so that's what I was really trying to do with this book, was use my personal stories as kind of like, you know, a sister companion to whatever your story is. And there's personal details in there. I don't know, y'all. Like we all have different ways of sharing. Like I had a friend say to me at one point, she's like, you will tell anything to anyone and people think they know you. And she's like, they don't know shit about you. And so like I only know that reflected back to me. Like I don't know that from the inside, but that might be part of it. Like I've never had any issue sharing facts. Like if I do something, I won't do something that I'm deeply ashamed of. Like that's just Like that's my moral compass. So if I'm not like deeply ashamed, then why wouldn't I, you know what I mean? Like why wouldn't I share? And yeah, I guess like knowing the exterior facts doesn't necessarily mean to me that someone knows you. Although I do think I get into some of the interior facts in this one. Like I try to let people see how it feels. But I don't know. I try very hard to digest my past. You know what I mean? Like not to like drag it around with me as some thing that still needs to be worked through. Like I try to work it through as I go. So what's in this book is not, like this was not a therapy book. Like some people write a book because it's their therapy to write the book. This is not a therapy book. Like this is me very carefully picking through 8 years worth of journals. I mean, I have a huge stack of journals that I was working from to find the right stories to lay down the breadcrumbs so that somebody else could follow the trail. So that might be part of why it wasn't so traumatic, is because I was really focused on an end goal that wasn't about me.
Yeah. That's very interesting, your creative process. Thanks for sharing that.
So, and you asked about the early books.
Yeah, the collection.
The collection.
Yeah.
So the early books, Herbarium, Bestiary, Crystallary, that's the 3 medicine kingdoms. From, you know, like if you study pretty much any of the ancient medicines, Taoist medicine is something that I dove deep into. Medicine came from 3 kingdoms: animal, vegetable, mineral. So if you think about it, we still get our medicine from animal, vegetable, mineral, right? You know, mineral is the one that I think people get a little like, wait, how does that work? But before we could take our iron tablets in a pill, the ancient Taoists would take a piece of hematite, put it in water, let it soak for 24 hours, and then you sip the water. So, you know, when we're talking about crystals, we're talking about minerals. And we're talking about the mineral components and how they interact both with your physical body and with your metaphysical body. So that was the concept for those first 3 books. And then I was actually up at my publishers at one point, and one of the women on the publishing team, she's actually the children's book publisher, said to me, okay, the only thing that you haven't really talked about is time. And I was like, ooh, time. So I wrote The Wild Wisdom Companion, which is about the Wheel of the Year and how to use the 3 medicine kingdoms through the Wheel of the Year. So that's one that you all don't have.
I know, yeah,
Yes,
I got that one.
yes, we have to get it.
Who had it?
Someone in the audience has it. It's
I
very
was gonna say,
cool.
We have one that can be followed up. So that's the original collection. So that's the Wild Wisdom Companion.
We will be getting this. Yeah, it's very neat. And then
And
there's
it comes with little pockets.
Yeah, it has little pockets at the solstice and the equinox, so that you can kind of almost use it as a scrapbook through the year. And then there are also cards in the back.
I took mine out.
And I love Kate's drawings for these particular cards.
Gorgeous.
I don't think that they have any plans to make them into a deck because the book hasn't sold as well as the other books, which means that it doesn't get like elevated and get its own deck. But who knows, if everyone starts buying it, then it'll end up getting a deck.
We'll work on it.
Yeah, we'll work on
We'll
it.
work on
I
it.
think you're very thoughtful in the format and the layout of how you've organized things. Like talk a little bit about night school and then the companion and then how you organize the journal too. That wasn't on our sale last night is helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so that first group I did with one publisher, and then I switched publishers and did a book called The Night School. And my mom said, are you sure you want to publish this book? You're telling everyone everything you know, there's nothing left. But my idea with The Night School was, I was a philosophy major in college, and what I was noticing as I was studying mysticism was that a lot of the mystical principles were based in ancient philosophy. Like if you go back to Aristotle and Plato and stuff, the mystical principles are baked into those older philosophies. And I was like, wow, how did we get so disconnected from the roots of this practice? Like this is not an 18th century practice or a 17th century practice. this goes all the way back to the Egyptian mystery schools. So I wanted to kind of dig back and show the expanse, the timeline for all these practices, and I wanted to do it in a highly readable way, because if anyone's read ancient philosophy or books on it, it is like, woo! So I broke it down into very short bite-sized lessons, and I created a character, B. Marlowe, who's the headmistress of the night school. And the thought was, if you actually went to Hogwarts, what would you learn? And B's kind of snarky and funny, and she just keeps everything light and moving. And y'all, it was so much fun to write like a character. She took over my world. She redecorated my office. For the entire time I was writing the book, I ate peanut butter and banana sandwiches for breakfast. I don't eat peanut butter and bananas. But like, she became super real. And yeah, like, you wouldn't believe my office now has Persian rugs. I mean, like, I had to buy a book on Persian rugs and learn about the different regions. You know, it was really fun to just kind of embody somebody else and to see how they would write about this stuff. So the night school's super foundational. Like I think of it as the most beginner book and the most advanced book, both. You know, because it lays out like where everything came from, so that you don't need somebody else's craft book or spell book or whatever, because you will get the principles and then you'll be able to do it for yourself. So, you know, it walks you through, and in that way it is very beginner. But on the other hand, it's putting concepts together that I think aren't usually put together in our modern books. And so, you know, from that point of view, it's the advanced end.
I think it's funny how you said that when you were writing the night school, the character, the lens through which you were writing took over. And that sort of brings me back to the conversation we had about, you know, Liz Gilbert's Big Magic, and sort of these ideas that come to us on like the, what do you call it, like the fates, or, you know, these ideas are sort of injected into the collective, and maybe they go to a couple of different people, and who sort of grabs it and pulls it and births it into the physical form. Do you think that, you know, night school was part of that?
That's interesting. You know, I like, there have been moments, and I'm not going to come up with an exact example, where like I've had something I've been toying with. Oh, actually, I do have an exact example. I've started working on a book, my first novel. We'll see. It's my Training Wheels novel. I don't know if I'll get good at it. I don't know where it'll go, if anywhere. But I started working on it, and it takes place at the Cloisters.
Cool.
The Metropolitan Museum of the Cloisters. And I was super excited about it, and I was like well into working on it when it came across my radar that a book just came out called The Cloisters. And it's a novel. It has tarot and stuff in it. And it takes place at the Cloisters. So, you know, like I do think that sometimes like something comes into the zeitgeist and many people grab it. But, you know, I haven't read the book because first of all, I don't really read nonfiction, so I don't have a problem not reading other books similar to the books I've been writing, because I'm a fiction reader. But it's a rule for me not to read other books similar to what I'm working on when I'm working on it. It's just too easy to accidentally sponge something up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's my rule. Yeah. So I have not read The Cloisters following that rule, but everyone tells me, you know, who's read like drafts of stuff and what I'm working on, that it's quite different. I have some architecture in my background, and I became really interested in how the Cloisters were brought over from France. So there was like a down on his luck sculptor who was living in France, and there was this like trend in America where people wanted medieval buildings from Europe here in America. And so he was like, hey, you know, I'm going to buy a couple cloisters and dismantle them and put them. I'm like, who thinks of this, right?
So interesting.
So, but it was a fad at that point. You in the early 1900s. They were literally dismantling buildings, and this was before historic preservation societies in Europe. And so a lot of these buildings were falling down. They couldn't afford to keep them up. They were just like happy to make some money off of them and ship them to America in pieces. And so I became really fascinated with that concept, and I'm kind of, my story has to do with the architecture and, these dismantled cloisters, which the other story apparently does not. So
I have to thank you for that explanation, because when I was about 10, I went to the cloisters, and I did not understand what the hell is happening there. Like, why is this? And my mother said, which my mother would always take me to these places, I just really wanted to go to like the theme park and go on roller coasters. My mom would take me to these places. And like looking back, like great, but like I was like a pissed off kid about it. And she told me that it was like a monastery. And so I was like, cool. And we went there, and we talked about how I love religious people. I do love a good religious person in an outfit. And so I show up to the MoMA cloisters, like walking around going, where are the nuns and the monks in this place? Like, I was so, like, what do you mean, we're like here to see art? Because I thought we were going to be like in a religious order.
yeah.
And I never knew how they got there. I guess I was so scared about not seeing monks and nuns that I never went back. So now I feel like, and it was obviously pre-Google where you just didn't know answers to things unless you went to a library. And now you solved that for me.
So now we'll do a field trip to the cloister.
I might go back now.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So the cloisters is actually 4 different cloisters from 4 different parts.
Oh my God, it's a cloister mashup?
It's a cloister mashup.
Oh, Lord.
It's a cloister mashup.
It's amazing.
It's a cloister mashup, and so that really,
The fun things that we learned.
that really
Okay,
fascinated me.
let's see.
Yeah.
Totally.
So someday, who knows? Maybe there will be a story of a cloister mashup.
I mean,
Looking for questions.
I'm just seeing if there's any questions, you guys. I have my fat face in the camera, so.
I know that Rye was
Do you
really
want to show?
excited.
Do you want to show them the book that no one else could see?
Oh, sure. That we're gonna order too. We're gonna get it. That's
Yeah,
lovely.
We're gonna get this
But
book.
I'm just thinking none of them saw it.
I actually want to look at the book too because it might give me another question from Maya.
Very cool.
How are we doing on time?
Oh, that's a good question.
It's 2:45.
Because we want to leave time for everybody
Yes,
to ask questions.
exactly.
You wanted to read a little bit?
Yeah, and I'd love to read a little
Yeah.
bit if you all
Yeah.
want to.
Okay, that sounds great. Dee, can we use your book for the?
You may use whatever you would like.
What segments
It's
you have.
beautiful.
I was thinking chapter 7.
Wait, winter. So this is beautiful. So I was wondering to see if you were using, the Wheel of the Year holidays or this.
I actually purposefully didn't.
I like that.
Because I feel like, again, the label thing.
Mhm. Are you a pagan? Are you a Wiccan? What are you doing?
And truthfully, people say to me, like, people will be like, oh, what are you doing for Lammas? I'm like, Lammas, which one is that? And I have to, like, go and look it up,
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm sure I'm not the only one who doesn't identify necessarily with all the different titles. Yeah.
Is there a chair back there?
So,
Yeah, there's a chair.
Oh, okay.
okay.
Maya's gonna read from.
So shall I read a little bit? All right, let me just grab another mouthful
Sipply.
of pumpkin spice black tea. Tis the season, right? Okay.
Spice everything.
So, in this chapter, my grandmother just died, and the previous chapter ends with my mom and I sitting on the couch, and I'll just read the last couple lines of the last chapter too for context. That day, I sat numb on the sofa, simply looking for the next action, the next thing to do. I glanced at my mom, sitting forward on the couch, staring at her hands. Mom, what do we do? I asked again, moving in closer, shoulder to shoulder. She leaned, reaching for my hand. I waited, ready to spring into action, but her answer left me stranded. I have no idea, she replied. We did, of course, figure out what to do after my grandmother's passing. It started simply. My mom looked up from our clasped hands and said, let's phone Aunt Gloria. Aunt Gloria was not a blood relative. She was my mom's best friend. She was also Jewish in a way no one in my family managed or desired to be. Sure, both families belonged to the same synagogue. I went to Hebrew school with her kids. But on our side of the street, Judaism was social and political. My parents went to shul, not to chat with God, but to connect with their culture. They donated to United Jewish Appeal. They felt vaguely guilty when they ate shellfish or bought a car made in Germany. But for Aunt Gloria, Judaism was the weft of her being. It enlivened and fed her spirit. It was both a compass and a map. Her blood told her exactly what to do when someone died. Yikadal v'yishkadal Shnei Rabbah. Glorified and sanctified be God's great name throughout the world, which he has created according to his will. These first words of the mourner's Kaddish had played through my mind in the days following Jan's death. I kept looking for comfort in the Kaddish's cadence, but the words remained dry and dusty in my mouth. But as I watched Aunt Gloria pray after my grandmother's passing, it was obvious these words were not dust to her. They were rooted and grounded, something vital within her being. They connected her to a lineage that knew what to do when someone died. I joined the moving meditation that took over my parents' home. Mom's friends slid through a spontaneous choreography, touching a shoulder or nodding gently as they passed her on their way to cover mirrors and put yarmulkes in a basket by the door. The rabbi stopped in. Trays of lox and whitefish were delivered. Bags of bagels appeared. Sit, Aunt Gloria said over and over to my mother. You don't have to do anything. On each of the 3 nights my family sat Shiva, a minion arrived. Sometimes these were people we knew. Other times they were members of the congregation doing community service, attending so we had enough people present to say the prayers for the dead. My grandmother's friends showed up with stories, their bright barks of laughter lightening the morning. As the congregation gathered the 3rd night, I retreated to the screened-in porch. I'd never been able to reconcile the tenets of Judaism with my admittedly nebulous spiritual beliefs. As the sun set, fireflies began to dance on the far side of the screen. They circled the oak tree and blinked through the meadow beyond the house. Inside there was a droning hum of voices, but on the porch it was the katydid chorus that declared the sanctity of the night. I sat on the picnic table, facing the growing darkness. My soon-to-be brother-in-law, dressed in sharply creased dress pants and a button-down shirt, stuck his head out the kitchen door, rousing me from my reverie. Are you coming in? He asked, his voice a match for the moment, with its lilting Israeli accent. The service is starting. Melancholy rose in my throat, claws scraping my vocal cords. I knew what I needed wasn't in there. I twisted to look at him. Do you believe God is everywhere? I asked. Of course, he answered. I could hear the smirk in his voice, but couldn't interpret it. He'd already had more pain in his life than most could bear. His relationship with God, if there was one, was a mystery to me. Then if God wants me, she can find me out here, I said. David grinned. One tooth overlapped another, giving his smile a dose of added charm. I like the way you think, he said, and winked before he ducked back into the house. Voices rose as he opened the door. Katydids took over as he closed it. The inside voices praised a God I'd never met, a demanding God who had never folded me under a wing or took time to comfort my fears. The katydids sang the glory of the night, which every evening draped me in darkness, offering up dreams and visions and possibilities. The night held me when I cried and offered stars to dry my tears. I pictured my grandma held in the bosom of the darkness, listening to the katydids as they trilled their hallelujah chorus. I could meet her in that almost place, and together we could look for shooting stars and recall the stories etched by the constellations. The foreign phrases chanted by my friends and family inside didn't conjure her. I had to unwind the words and search between their spaces for meaning and comfort. Out here there was nothing to reconcile. I listened to the night noises and watched the stars pop out. Out here I could just be. I didn't have to mentally modernize archaic prayers or feel like a hypocrite for speaking words I didn't believe. I didn't have to seek for a sense of spirit. It simply surrounded me.
I love that. That was very good.
Anybody have a comment or something to share or a question? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I just felt very drawn into it, the story, and I was also going through, I had lost my mother, going through that same thought process of like, some of this is so archaic, and we're doing it, what's the meaning? And on the other side, just wanting to be in my own space, my own thoughts.
Yeah.
So, it was definitely resonating.
Any other questions?
You just like to share, just put it on out there.
Let me just see if there's any comments because I don't have good vision.
Yeah, Mary? Yeah.
Writing has, of course, been an important part of your life. Intrinsically, it feels that you were always a writer, drawn to writing. And it also was a part of your kind of spiritual process as well. For people who may not be, maybe afraid to put pen to paper, how can they make that part of their finding spirituality and finding the magic and hearing the voice?
Great question.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, I have always been a very self-conscious writer. Like, I don't know. I think because I always wanted to be an author, like, I was always aware, even when I was journaling, that someone might read this. So if you are not me and you don't have that in you, congratulations. It's much easier. I love to just do timed writing. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Put your pen on the page and keep writing, whether you have something to say or not. And so what often happens for me when I do this is I end up recording what's going on around me. You know, oh, a squirrel just jumped off the oak tree out the kitchen window. Because you're like, what am I going to write about? But what it does is it just kind of loosens up something in you. Like just that, like, I can write. I can just kind of scroll my pen across the page. It's okay. Nothing bad's happening to me. You know, I haven't been struck by lightning yet. And it just, like, unwinds the self-consciousness, which I think is the first step. And then one of the things that I love to do is I love to talk to the world through my writing. So that can look a number of different ways. That can look like, okay, oak tree, let's have a conversation. And, you know, just kind of set the intention. I'm going to let the oak tree use my hand, and I'll often start something like, Dear Maia, so that I kind of step out of myself and let that other speak to me. I do this with, like, ancestor letters. You know, like, I'll do it with asking my grandmother or an uncle or even an ancestor whose name I don't know to just come through. You feel like it's crap at first. You know, like you start writing and you're like, this is bullshit. This is just me. And then after 3 or 4 minutes, when you kind of loosen up, because remember, you have the timer set and you're like, am I done yet? Am I done yet? You find that you're writing things that are maybe not what you would have thought you would write. Right? And you're like, huh. You know, and look, we can analyze living daylights out of this stuff. We can say, like, did it come from my deep subconscious? Did it come from my ancestors? I don't know. When, you know, with ancestor stuff, my thought is that our ancestors live in our DNA. So if it is our deep subconscious, what's the difference between our deep subconscious and our ancestors? I don't know. They're in us somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to the world around me, when I am at my best self, I'm connected to everything in this world. So why shouldn't I be able to catch a bit of energy from the oak tree? But mostly, I feel like we have to soften our rational mind in these moments. You know, like we talk ourselves into or out of anything. So for me, if it heals something in me, if it makes me feel better about myself, if it allows me to figure out what my next step is, then it is an overall good. And I don't have to rationally understand each and every bit of it. And I think that's what those first like 3 or 4 minutes of writing do. They like start to shake loose the rationality and allow me to just kind of work through it and put it aside. Because your rational brain is good for some stuff, but it's not so good for other stuff.
That is true. Thank you for reminding me about the timer exercise, because that's an old journaling practice that I used to use in a journaling group, and now I'm like, oh my goodness, tomorrow we're going back.
Yeah.
Oh, it's such a great practice. It really is amazing.
Yeah, it's very simple. You know, I think sometimes we get ourselves like into these really complex, like, you know, like we think it has to be like, I must cast a circle. Right. Like first I must take a cleansing bath. Then I must, you know, use herbs and detox my aura. Then I shall cast a circle. Then I shall sit in the center of the circle with my journal. And by the time you're through all these steps, you forgot what you were trying to do in the first place. So I'm a huge fan of keep it simple. Remember that you're like, ultimately, for me, every single practice comes back to connection. I'm trying to connect with myself, with someone else, with the world around me. It's always about connection. I mean, I suppose if you're a person who's hexing, maybe it's not about connection, but truthfully, I think the only way a hex works is if
a connection.
You connect. Right? So, yeah. So,
Yeah.
I am that bitch. No, I'm kidding.
No problem. All right. So Rye is one of our customers. It's in the middle of the country, and she said, please tell her she's my favorite author. So sweet.
Thank you.
And for the people who may not know, she'd like to know: have you ever learned anything about yourself that you didn't know, which came out while writing?
Ooh, good question.
Yeah. It's a great question, and I would say absolutely yes, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to pull anything up at the moment, but like sometimes you write something and you're like, oh damn. You know, like the words come out and you look at them and you're like, I didn't know that I understood that. You know, and I think I had many moments like that with this book where it's like I thought I understood it one way, and then when I was like getting granular and explaining it, I understood more deeply than I thought I did, or I had a more nuanced point of view than I thought I did. And that was actually something people told me about memoir. They were like, you think that you don't remember, you think that you don't know. Once you start writing, like just the setting the intention to write about a certain thing and then starting to write unlocks something. I have a crap memory. I mean, I could not have written this book without that stack of journals. My memory is quite bad, like to the point where it's bad. Like the whole entire family will be like, "No, Maya, you were there and you did say that." I'll be like, I was in Mexico with all of you. Yes, really? Yeah. But there is something in the writing that unlocks, and like as it unlocks not only the kind of the physicality of like, yes, I was in Mexico, but I thought this or felt this, or you know, and that comes up. So yeah, great question.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you would ever turn to like pure fiction, like writing just roll out.
So I'm trying. And it's one of those, it's a different skill set. I don't know if I'll be good at it, but letting magic in is actually what gave me the confidence to try, because letting magic in is what is on what we call a hero's journey arc, which there's a guy named Joseph Campbell who talked about mythology and how throughout history there is one like story structure that we're using over and over and over again. He calls it the hero with 1,000 faces, because there's just different heroes going through the same structure. And if you excuse me, like watch movies and stuff, you'll start to recognize it. You know, you start to be like, oh, okay, you know, here's the bumbling person going through their everyday life, and then something falls into their lap, you know, like whether it's Gandalf knocking on the door, or a new job offer, or whatever it is, and the person says, no, not me, and then something happens that makes them step in and onto their path, and then they have their trials and tribulations, and, you know, so there is a very specific pattern, and it's used in story, and I used it for letting magic in. I was kind of able to be like, oh, I can tell a story arc, because what I was doing before was I was noticing that I could come up with a setting, or I could come up with a character, and I could like write a great character description, but like a story is about what the character does, not just the character existing. And I wouldn't be able to get beyond that. I'd just be like, oh, I created a cool character. What you gonna do? So, you know, what I'm working on right now is actually extremely complex, and so I know I don't have it yet, because for me, when things are super complex, I'm trying too hard, and there comes a point with all the books where they simplify. Like, you know, when I started with Herbiary, I was like, okay, I'm going to think about it like the tarot, and each plant is going to be either earth, air, water, or fire, and I was coming up with these grand systems, and like I was just confusing myself. And so I'm still there with this novel, like I'm kind of like all over the place. So I think I'll know that I have it when it simplifies, and it's just like, oh, instead of like, Gemini brain. Yeah.
I think I have all your books almost.
Thank you.
And I think my girlfriend has all your books too. And you know, doing the witch camp and night school really helped us keep us sane during COVID. And I was playing in my cupboard. I had this huge cupboard that has all my herbs in it, my whatever, and I put all the cards in there, and sometimes some would fall out, or I pick up one, I go, oh, okay, here's the message for today, like that random use. But I have to share, when I was coming over here, I got in my car, and first of all, when I looked at the message, it said, you were coming today, and I went, it was supposed to be November, I thought, so I'm off already, right? So I get in my car, and I'm following the Google Maps, right? And I know how to get here, but I'm following the Google, it took me so long. You won't believe the convoluted way it was taking. And I was like, okay, this is very good, I get it. Maia's here, it's like an eclipse right now at 1:55, she's on there, and I'm totally confused, so they're saying there's gonna be something that happens, and I said, okay. So this is a good timing, and what you're talking about is really that of like, kind of like you get jammed up, jumbled up, and all these things, and then all of a sudden it kind of clears.
Yes.
You find your destination.
Yes.
Amityville Apothecary.
Right here. This is the destination. Yeah.
So it's really wonderful. I mean, I've written and a lot. When I was a kid, I used to keep a diary, and then my mother would find my diary and read it. So I stopped, and then I started writing songs was my next thing, and that has served me. But I write a lot, and it's very funny, the process, because sometimes nobody's there, you know, it's that pen to paper, and just kind of like randomly, I hate this is so boring, you know, and all of a sudden something changes. You know? So thank you about that process of letting go and being open to what happens.
Yeah, and I think also just knowing it's the same for all of us, right? Like, you're not the only person who sits down and goes, this is boring, why am I doing this? It's only 30 seconds in, are we done yet, you know? Like, we all do that, and yet somehow something gets shaken loose.
I have a question for you. You're writing a book right now, and I'm in the process of doing something, and I'm relying on that, you know, somebody's been talking to me, whatever, you know, ideas have been coming. What do you do when they wake you up at night and they want you to stay
right
up
now?
all night?
Yeah. So I put a notebook by my bed. I don't turn on the lights because I need my sleep. So if like something comes through in the night, I write it down in the dark. It's a hot, like you find it in the morning, you're like, can I read this? But yeah, I feel like if I don't, I've noticed two things. One, if I don't get it down, then I keep trying to run it in my mind, like to hold on to it. So I was like, I've got to get it out, because otherwise my brain just keeps saying it over and over again. And then the other thing that it's taken me a long time to realize this, is I will forget. Like, I come up with things and I think, oh, this is so good, I will never forget it.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Everybody,
like I come up with a title for the next book or whatever. I'm like, this is so good. And literally 15 minutes later, I'll be like, wait, what was that thing?
You're like,
yeah,
it's so true.
So I do have to write it down, but I don't get out of bed and turn on the lights and things like that. I just keep the notebook by the bed. I leave it open. It's often like really bad chicken scratch, but usually it's enough that I can make it out. And also the other thing that's happened for me over time is I have enough of those like emergency must write this down right now stickies around the house, and so many of them are crap that in the moment you're like, it's brilliant, and then you find it 3 days later and you're like, no, it's not. So you know, like that's also quieted me a little bit, that like, okay, a lot of these things you think are brilliant in the moment are not as brilliant as you think they are, so if you lose them, it's not actually that big a deal, you know. But it's taken the experience of reading 100,000 of those little sticky notes that I thought were so brilliant. I'm like, yeah, mine, no.
Well, thank you all for coming out in the rain to join us today and to come show such wonderful support to Maia. Thank you for being here, Maia. It's been really fun.
This has
spending time
been
with you.
amazing. You guys, thank you. I
Really
really I so appreciate you all coming out.
We'll have her come back and we will restock all the books because you guys bought all of it.
Yes, we will restock
Thank you for joining us
everything.
online, guys.
Thank you, guys.
And we'll save this to YouTube.
Yep,
too,
we're
if you
gonna
wanna
save
watch
it.
Watch it.